The rich history of Rosemount High School begins in the early 20th century and shares the history of the entire school district into the 1950s. The first multi-room school in Rosemount was built in 1896 to house 8 elementary grades in 4 classrooms. As early as 1904, students who finished elementary classes were able to take Latin, algebra, civics, and bookkeeping. Teachers and parents pushed for more of these secondary classes to compete with neighboring schools.
The 1896 building quickly became altogether insufficient, let alone suitable for adding a complete secondary program. A state inspector wrote, "The present building is inadequate and unsatisfactory from nearly every standpoint. Unless definite steps are taken soon, I would feel justified in recommending the building be condemned."
A referendum was held in 1915 to approve a new site north of town. Despite a favorable 88-22 vote, the yes votes fell short of the required majority of Rosemount's 230 qualified voters. Although local press warned of being left without a school, a second vote also failed. The board chose a new western site, but the third vote again failed. Finally, in November of 1917, 139 voters came out in favor of the northern site.
Education didn't wait for the new school. The second floor of the village hall across from the 1896 building was rented and a 5th teacher added. A complete high school program was launched in September of 1917. This allowed Margaret Cuniff, Florence Gibbons, Josephine Gibson, and Margaret Quigley to become the first graduating class of Rosemount High School in the spring of 1918.
The new site, purchased from Thomas and Margaret Connolly, was located in the country north of town. Hopes of being ready in the fall of 1918 were dashed by the clouds of World War I. Material shortages meant federal authorities had to assent to the school's necessity. In December of 1919, the school was finally ready for occupancy. Over 140 students in 12 grades moved in. The 2-story building offered new amenities: a basement, indoor plumbing, coat room, gym with shower rooms, areas for manual training and domestic sciences, and a large room with a divider.
A superintendent, principal, high school English teacher, and 4 elementary teachers staffed the new school. Enrollment through the 1920s held at around 160. Graduating classes ranged from 4 to 26, averaging about 10. Low attendance was a struggle in these times. Boys were often kept home to work. Getting to school commonly involved a long, cold trek. In 1920, 2 horse-drawn buses carried about 45 children daily. One of the first motorized buses was fashioned on a 1928 Chevy truck. Fully heated, factory-built buses debuted by 1932.
Despite limited transportation and low attendance, school activity flourished. High school initiation included a spelling contest and faces coated in flour. A debate team explored the issue, resolved that all nations should disarm. Senior prom included dinner at Al's Cafe, followed by a dance at the school with music provided by a student at the piano. The sense of community that developed helped establish Rosemount as a social and commercial center.
The new building was, however, immediately inadequate in some respects. The gym was less than 1/3 of the size of a standard basketball court. Spectators lined the walls and peeked through doorways, not knowing when players would step on or fall into them. Even for plays, students were smothered. By 1930, graduations moved to Garrity's Hall downtown. Despite these shortcomings, the school performed well. In a 1932 letter, a state director noted, "I found a good school, capably administered and purposefully taught."
The Great Depression brought lower enrollments, wage cuts, and the elimination of a teacher position. By 1935, education incentives emerged. The state offered families $3 a month for each child attending high school, and federal aid allowed Rosemount to begin its first band program. Still, high school enrollment was further hurt by the freedom of kids in nearby schools to attend high school in Lakeville, Farmington, or even Hastings. Each offered a full gymnasium, organized sports, drama, and other enticements.
Steps were taken to combat low enrollment. A spring field day was held to recruit 8th graders, with local merchants furnishing pop and hot dogs. In 1934, the board voted to organize a football team, but it failed to raise immediate interest from boys. Prospects grew so dim in 1937 that the state threatened to close the high school and transport kids to Farmington. Superintendent E.T. Olson proposed introducing commercial training, including shorthand and typing, to attract girls. Despite disfavor from the state, the board approved the plan. Attendance immediately jumped from 65 to 104 students.
The high school program stabilized. Art and orchestra were added to the curriculum. Advanced home economics and mechanical drawing enriched the domestic studies. In 1938, the school sought to create enthusiasm for football and approved the purchase of jerseys. They were throwaways from Northfield, but at least they belonged to Rosemount. Previously, the team had to ask opponents to bring their second jerseys for Rosemount to wear.
The 1940s began with the hiring of a new young superintendent, Lambert Baumgartner, who would also teach science and coach all competitive sports. His energy would be needed as the World War II decade brought unique problems. Shortly after war was declared in 1942, the War Department designated 13,500 acres east of town for a munitions plant. Trailer camps mushroomed all over town. Every available space for someone to sleep was put to use. Students were warned not to go downtown for fear of car accidents.
The influx of people wreaked havoc at the school as 150 students were added to the existing 225. Rooms normally used for 30 were filled with 50. Classes expanded into the basement and filled every corner but the boiler room. Teachers were scarce, with workers coming in waves, bricklayers first, then carpenters. Teachers never knew how many kids to expect each morning.
The Gopher Ordnance Plant also brought financial stress due to lost assessed valuation. Federal aid offered some help, providing nearly 20% of the total budget each year from 1943 to 1947. After the war, when the plant was dismantled, the federal aid disappeared, but the property was sold to the University of Minnesota and remained tax-exempt. Rosemount sought state aid and prevailed.
In addition to war workers, growth was fueled by the closing of rural schools. This continued after the war bulge wound down. The mostly Irish Rosemount community responded well to the diversity brought on by war workers and integration with neighboring German and Scandinavian communities. Kenneth Jacobson, the high school principal from 1936 to 1946, and a man of Danish descent, praised local broad-mindedness, professing, "I have a soft spot in my heart for Rosemount. I place these people on a pedestal."
The Irish majority inspired the Irish moniker from sports fans. Baumgartner, a former college letterman, raised the prominence of athletics and formed the R Club for letter winners. Teams competed in football, basketball, baseball, boxing, wrestling, tumbling, track, and ping pong. Rosemount played in the Little Five Conference with Lakeville, Matamidi, Randolph, and St. Paul Park. The first homecoming was held in 1940, featuring a pep fest and parade with floats. That year, Rosemount won its very first trophies in football, basketball, and baseball.
In 1944, the Irish made big news by ousting Farmington in sub-district playoffs. Twin Cities newspapers registered surprise. A comparatively unheralded and obscure Rosemount team gained the distinction of knocking the Farmington High School squad completely out of the picture. Rosemount's chances of victory before the game were about 1 in 100. But what did those little roses do? They put on a surprise attack and had Farmington blocked out of the district for the first time since Rover was a pup.
In 1946, the football team dominated the Little Six Conference, which had added Prior Lake. 6 Irish made the All-Star team after the team went unbeaten in its last 9 starts. In 1949, they followed up by outscoring opponents 200-25 in 7 games to become Little Six champions. In 1951, the basketball team went to the state tournament, and the St. Paul Dispatch heralded Rosemount, without even a home floor, could become the darling of the tournament.
The 1940s would not close without Rosemount finding itself in the thick of a nationwide trend: consolidation. In 1947, Minnesota had 7,606 school districts, and the state set forth a process to reduce the number to a few hundred. Rosemount, known then as District 19, was ready for consolidation. Eyeing resources from a broader area and the stability of students staying in the district, enrollment was high. The 1918 building was inadequate from every perspective, and parents were demanding new programs in agriculture, home economics, and shop. Given this need, Rosemount was among the first areas in the state to reorganize.
Initially, 16 full districts and 4 partial ones were assigned to Rosemount. 4 western districts objected. Districts 15 and 104 of what is now Burnsville threatened legal action and were released, but their students attended Rosemount until Burnsville High School was ready in 1956. Districts 17 and 94 of modern-day Apple Valley also resisted, but had to face their sparse population. Consolidation required majority votes from both the urban and rural areas. On June 26, 1950, both areas cast overwhelming ballots in favor of consolidation.
The vast new district, known briefly as District 5 until the state unified the numbering system in 1957, was spread over 100 square miles. Provisions had to be made to house another 300 students. The 1918 building was overcrowded with its own 327 students. To solve the crisis, old rural school buildings were moved into town, along with government surplus barracks from Fort Snelling, and some classes continued in the newer rural schools until new facilities could be made available.
In 1951, voters approved a new building adjacent to the 1918 building. The expansion contained 12 elementary classrooms, plus all the necessary departments for the high school. One wing housed lab rooms for agriculture, home economics, industrial arts, and band. A large gym auditorium finally provided space for hot lunch, as well as athletic and drama events. Rosemount finally had the modern luxuries long available in neighboring districts. The building was dedicated in 1953.
During the 1950s, Rosemount enjoyed the status of any complete and typical school in a small town. Enrollment grew modestly. Agricultural and commercial programs flourished. Athletes brought home conference trophies, and band director Joseph Brabeck composed the high school's own fight song. New activities included one-act play contests, various bands, a pep club, and clubs for future farmers, librarians, teachers, and homemakers.
The 1960s ushered in population growth which would come to dominate the following decades. The district would transform from rural to suburban to metropolitan. In time, new high schools would splinter students and staff from Rosemount High School 3 separate times.
Rivers had long held most freeways and developments to parts west, north, and east of the Twin Cities. Hilly landscape had also limited settlement in what is now Eagan. But by 1960, I-35W was completed south of Minneapolis to Highway 13, and 6 years later extended to Highway 42. To the east, Orrin Thompson built housing developments it named Apple Valley after a successful development of the same name in California. Orrin Thompson notified the district of its intent to build 400 homes per year from 1963 to 1967. This and more were built, and other developers joined in. In January of 1969, the village of Apple Valley incorporated.
The new developments reshaped the district's demographics. Salesmen, office workers, professionals, and skilled tradesmen relegated farmers to a minority. These highly mobile populations had high expectations for their children's education, demanding progressive, sophisticated schools. Plans were needed to supply schools. Voters would be called to the polls many times in the following years, but the first vote in February of 1959 to expand the 1953 building failed. It resulted, however, in greater study and planning that set out a successful path.
The plan called for going to a 6-3-3 plan of 6 elementary grades, junior high for grades 7 to 9, and high school for grades 10 to 12. The senior high would be separated from grades 7 through 9 in a new building. Longer range plans called for additional schools. Phase 1 passed in November of 1959, and Phase 2 passed in January of 1963, authorizing construction of a separate senior high school.
Rosemount High School opened at its present location in 1964, albeit only a portion of what exists today. Expansions would come in ensuing referenda. A 1966 referenda added a 3-story classroom addition plus a shop wing. A 1968 referenda added a cafeteria and second gym area. This same referenda also included funds to purchase a site for the second high school, Apple Valley.
The 1960s also brought major growth in curriculum with more focus on individualized opportunities. The vocational agricultural program that was key to selling the 1953 bond was dropped in 1965 due to lack of interest. New vocational opportunities included drafting, advanced electronics, power mechanics, and even aviation. Business programs included on-the-job training in sales, marketing, and secretarial work. Accelerated reading and research skills bolstered English courses. French, Spanish, and German became options. Physics, chemistry, and advanced biology were introduced, as were Afro-American history, social studies, and leisure studies. Behind-the-wheel driver training, virtually unneeded in the once rural community, was introduced in the summer of 1962.
The 1960s also saw the advent and expansion of special education, school counselors, activities directors, and many other services we may take for granted today. Parent and community involvement changed in character as well. Parent-teacher conferences began in 1961 and were supplemented with monthly coffee parties. District-wide advisory committees had become an important means of civic engagement.
New activities in the 1960s included flag twirling and clubs for drama, chess, science, radio, and skiing. The National Honor Society and American Field Service emerged as organizations. In 1962, the Girls Athletic and Recreational Association, or GARA, was started and became a popular activity. GARA was the only opportunity for girls to participate in athletics.
Athletics also transformed. The Little Six Conference broke apart as its small schools grew. Rosemount was forced to play as an independent in 1959, then joined with Lakeville, Farmington, Prior Lake, Burnsville, and Simley to form the Minnesota Conference, named for its position between the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers. Excitement grew amongst fans and athletes. Basketball and baseball had been succeeding in the Little Six for years, but football particularly benefited. From September 1965 through March 1969, Rosemount teams dominated the Minnesota, bringing home 11 consecutive conference trophies across football, basketball, and baseball, with a 12th in track.
New residents came from places with wider offerings, and they demanded hockey, golf, wrestling, swimming, and cross-country. Hockey, which had started as an intramural team in 1961, finally materialized in a full-scale competitive program in 1971. By this time, wrestling, cross-country, swimming, and golf teams were already bringing home conference trophies.
Growth continued in the 1970s, starting with the addition of grade 9 for the 1969-1970 school year. Although freshmen were later moved back up the hill for 2 years, as enrollment doubled in 1975 alone, before they returned in 1976. Academically, the trimester elective system began in the fall of 1972, and study halls debuted. New activities included OEA, the Office Education Association, and DECA, the Distributive Education Clubs of America, as well as groups for future nurses, morning prayers, a service club, international club, and the ISETs. The school newspapers switched from blue and gold to Irish Impressions.
On the athletic front, far most significant was the start of girls' sports. It began with girls' track and swimming in 1971, adding gymnastics, volleyball, and basketball in 1972, tennis in 74, softball and skating teams in 1976, and cross-country in 1978. The boys, meanwhile, also added tennis and weightlifting. Soccer started in 78, with girls getting their own team in 1980. Cheerleading teams multiplied to cover virtually every sport. A leprechaun mascot, R.H. McRose, appeared, as did trainers. Competition-wise, the boys' basketball team created much buzz when it made the state basketball tournament in 1971 and again in 1978.
Facilities continued to take shape. In 1972, additions included a court and bleachers on the east side of the main gym, and choir rooms, trophy cases, and auxiliary gym. In 1973, voters approved the completion of the Rosemount High School campus and the construction of Apple Valley High School. Apple Valley opened at full capacity in the fall of 1976, leaving empty space at Rosemount. Rosemount's parking lot was expanded, and a new entrance was opened from Chile Avenue. The library addition opened in 1975, giving it a home after having moved around in prior years. A new track with metric distances ended the decade.
The impact of the opening of Apple Valley High School was far more than a facilities issue. Johnny Cake Ridge Road served as a dividing line. Friendships were affected and valued staff were lost in the split. One particular group of students from the Crystal Lake area suffered more than others, changing buildings 9 times over their 13 years.
I had 4 siblings that went through Rosemount High School, and I was there for 2 years, and then the opening of Apple Valley High School. And I can remember sitting in the lecture room over at Rosemount, determining what would be the school colors of Apple Valley, what would be the mascot, and we talked through all those things, but it just seems so odd being a Rosemount Irish person. You know, I think it's harder to be at the school that's not the new school in the moment, in that time, but there was such pride at Rosemount for who they were and what they could accomplish that it was more the friendships and making sure that the friendships would stay throughout a school that was now going to be 2 schools.
As the 1980s arrived, the split and change continued. beginning with a boost in school spirit. New Spirit Fests were held 3 times in 1978-1980, in addition to 10 Pep Fests. In 1981, the Homecoming Parade was revived, and Pride Week festivities included posters and a bonfire between soccer games. The football team rewarded this newfound spirit, capturing the 1981 State AA Football Championship with a win over the Moorhead Spuds.
Conference titles and/or state tournament appearances were enjoyed over the decade by wrestling, softball, which had also been state champs in 1979, baseball, hockey, boys soccer, boys basketball, girls basketball, who were runners-up in the 1988 state championship game, volleyball, gymnastics, which boasted a 1987 state champ, and girls track, who were state champs in 1984. In 1986, Rosemount joined the Lake Conference and would go on to face competition from many of the western and southern powerhouses.
New clubs and activities appeared over the decade: Spirit Club, the Work Experience Career Exploration Program, Ski Club, Mock Trial, Math Team, Academic Bowl, Computer Club, Photography Club, Teens Need Teens, and Peer Tutoring. The marching band, which had performed in Washington, D.C. for the nation's bicentennial in 1976, began performing and competitions in 1985 and would perform at the World Series in both 1987 and 1991, as well as a Vikings game in 1988 and the Prep Bowl in 1990.
Principal Jerry Kasem, who had served from the school's opening until 1979, was replaced by Dr. Paul Hadley and then Dr. Tom Wilson. New policies created senior privileges and computer scheduling took hold. Rosemount was recognized by the President with the School of Excellence Award in 1985. Temporary classrooms popped up outside as enrollment surged. Principal Wilson would depart in 1987 to begin plans for Egan High School and was replaced by Dr. J. Richard Dewey.
The juniors, the year before Egan opened up, they were in a situation of where they had to decide who's going to go to Egan and who's going to stay at Rosemount. And there was a quota that had to be at Egan High School or there would be a lottery. So if I am going to stay at Rosemount and my best friend decides that they're going to go to Egan High School because they might get a better chance at being on the stage or being in varsity, whatever sport it might be, I wouldn't understand that as a student because I would see that as a betrayal. And so there was a lot of those emotions going on when Egan High School opened up.
As the first school year of the 1990s began, Egan High School, which had opened for freshmen in the fall of 1989, took away students and staff. The split, however, created a resurgence of Irish pride, as Rosemount apparel was on prominent display in the less crowded space. The loss of the temporary classrooms was a welcomed change. Not as welcomed were the new co-curricular fees for athletics and activities that resulted from tightening budgets. Other adjustments included a new point-of-sale system in the lunch line and the implementation of a recycling program.
School spirit continued to be a hallmark of Rosemount High School, and many athletic teams and activities fared well in the 1990s. Girls basketball went 24-1 in 1990-91. Both baseball and girls soccer had numerous state tournament appearances. Baseball was the state runner-up in 1995. The boys hockey team also finished as runner-up in 1992. Wrestlers, weightlifters, gymnasts, and runners had successes early in the decade. Softball made state in 1990 and 98. The Irishettes won a state championship in 1997. Girls swim and dive and the cheer team were both state champs in the 1999-2000 school year.
A girls' hockey team, the Ringettes, was added in the 1992-93 school year and performed well. Adapted soccer and softball also began, giving new important opportunities for athletic involvement. New activities arising during the 1990s included Science Challenge, Explorers Club, chapters of Students Against Drunk Driving, Amnesty International, Business Professionals of America, and Fellowship of Christian Athletes, a culture group, service club, and A-Team. The Irish Update also started with the 1998-99 school year.
Facilities also saw some changes. The construction of the Performing Arts Center, or PAC, began in the spring of 1995 and opened in 1996. Perhaps most important to the students at this time was a new C-Link hallway connecting the two main sections of the building, wider stairwell doors, and new stairs added to the B-Link, which helped address congestion in the halls and added a popular hangout space. The weight room also found a new home in 1997.
Midway through the 1990s, the principal would again depart to prepare for opening another new high school. Greg Clausen became principal, and for the second time in just 8 years, students and staff would be split off when Eastview High School opened in the fall of 1997. Adding to the turmoil was the loss of 1,000 students over a 2-year transition that included attendance boundary changes. Rosemount was suddenly a much smaller school and at a competitive resource disadvantage to the new state-of-the-art school.
We went from a high school of about 2,500 students to 1,200 students. And there were a lot of questions that people were asking. We lost the economy of scale, and would we be able to offer some of those advanced placement courses and higher level courses? Would we be able to offer the same co-curricular opportunities as other schools in our district? And of course, there was a real concern about how we would compete in the Lake Conference at that time against schools that were much larger than Rosemount. And I think one of the things that really helped us was that the community, the school board, recognized that we would need some additional resources. And so we were provided additional funding, some additional staffing in some areas, and we were able to offer the same opportunities as other students would have.
In this new climate, resources for education took center stage. Grants allowed for the creation of a video production studio. The availability of college credit and AP courses grew. A new staff resource room better served teachers. A vehicle services program was enhanced, and full-time staff taught courses in health and emergency care. Construction of a new wing to house upgraded science facilities commenced in 2006. The improvements also included the Student Center addition and expansion of the shop facilities. In January of 2005, the Irish Sports Dome also opened and has supplied space for Irish teams to utilize.
State testing, which had begun in the 1990s, also gathered greater emphasis in the new century. Education initiatives shifted from the Profiles in Learning to No Child Left Behind, and the tragedy at Columbine High School in 1999 directed greater attention towards security measures. In 2008, after 12 years as principal, Greg Clausen retired and Dr. John Wollersheim became the new principal.
New activities since the turn of the century have included socially conscious groups like Target Market and Project 540, the Gay Straight Alliance, Group of Active Teens, GOAT, Green Team, High Schools Against Cancer, and Humans for Humanity. Other new groups included Young Republicans and Democrats, the Society of Asian Students, and Anamanga. Dance groups going by names like Bomb Squad, Hip Hop Dance Crew, and The Beyond have also stepped out.
In competitive pursuits, robotics and bowling teams began rolling, a trap team fired up, and equestrian riders took their reins. School district mountain bike and rugby teams also appeared. The biggest addition to athletics, however, was the addition of boys and girls lacrosse teams.
Several sports fared well in the new century's first decade, some of which were dropped in class due to smaller enrollment. Softball and boys track and field won state championships in 2006 and 2008 respectively. Other participants in state tournaments included girls basketball in 2002, boys cross country in 2002, 2006, and 2007, baseball in 2004 and 2008, boys soccer in 2006, football in 2006 and 2008, and girls cross country in 2009. The marching band also won the first of 9 consecutive state championships in 2006.
In the fall of 2009, Rosemount left the Lake Conference along with Apple Valley, Burnsville, Eagan, Eastview, Lakeville South, Lakeville North, Bloomington Jefferson, and Bloomington Kennedy, and added Prior Lake to form the new South Suburban Conference. In 2014, Farmington and Shakopee replaced the Bloomington schools.
Football has had great success in the new conference, making the state tournament in 5 of the last 7 seasons and finishing as state runner-up in both 2010 and 2013. Boys soccer made state in 2014, while girls soccer was runner-up in the state championship game in 2016. Boys lacrosse was also a state runner-up in 2014. Gymnastics made state in 2014, and girls cross country in 2010. Boys cross country has made each of the last 7 state tournaments. The adapted sports teams have been regulars in state title contests.
Artistically, the Clean Shorts Film Festival and on-the-air radio shows have come on the scene. The school's theater productions, choirs, and bands have become as strong as ever. The marching band continues to accumulate honors, performing in the Tournament of Roses Parade in 2014 and heading this fall to New York for Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, the first Minnesota band to do so in nearly 3 decades.
This fall will also bring some of the first facility changes seen in many years. A multi-purpose room will be added along with changes to the front of the building. The parking lot will be reconfigured, and congestion-relieving improvements will be made to the PAC foyer. With the oldest and perhaps most modest secondary building in the district, facility needs continue to be a thread in the school's history.
The past couple of decades have seen several Rosemount traditions take hold, while others, like the homecoming bonfire and flannel for Sadie's, have died out. Superfans have become the focal point of school spirit, along with a week of spirited homecoming attire and pep fests that feature classes facing off with the VICTORY chants, and freshmen endure the chomp. Tug-of-war battles begin the school year, and the winter assembly features a surprise guest each year. Senior benches and other class hangout areas remain a thing, and the periodic staging of mock accidents in the parking lot has taken on new meaning in an area of texting and cell phones.
When I first started, we were doing 8 or 9 dances throughout the year, and they were well attended. People loved coming to our dances. And then little by little, student attendance started to drop off at some of the dances. We used to do a snow days, which was the winter homecoming. And when we lost that, that was big. So you saw the homecoming parade go by the boards because kids didn't want to put the time into creating a parade. And that was basically the same for snow days. They didn't want to put time into a snow days a week. They wanted to have fun, which, makes sense. I think to some degree, I think the social media has entered in, and it takes their lives places that we couldn't even begin to have seen way back when. And that becomes more important to them than getting together and just having fun with one another. They say everything is cyclical, so maybe someday it'll all come back.
By far, the most important tradition is one of excellence in education. The faculty, staff, and administration of Rosemount High School, along with the quality of people and students in the Rosemount community, have made Rosemount High School a special place. Parents, businesses, and booster groups have been exceptional supporters and play an instrumental role in its success.
What I think makes Rosemount High School special are the people here, are the community. Over the years, incredible support for the school academically, keeping the school at the forefront of teaching and learning in Minnesota. Parents very positive and supportive of the faculty here and the students that are in our school. They're also unbelievably supportive of our faculty, and I think that support is gigantic. You can see it at our events. When we have an athletic event or a fine arts event, it's not uncommon for us to have very large crowds and very supportive people at these performances, encouraging our students as they perform.
As a student thinking about what made Rosemount High School special, it was the community. It is a tight-knit community. It's been a tight-knit community. But I can remember as a student, everything revolved around the school. And I believe that's true today. I know how much the city will work with the school district and how much the whole community revolves around the school. And it is a place now that's a larger community but still has that small town feel, which I believe a lot of people move to Rosemount for that very experience.
And frequently people will ask me, what do you miss about Rosemount High School? And I always say, it's the people, it's the students, it's the faculty, parents, and the community. One of the unique things about Rosemount is there is a strong community tie here. Still remember nights taking tickets at football games, and there'd be people that would come in the gate that really had no connection to Rosemount High School other than they were residents here and they wanted to be part of Rosemount High School.
I have always felt this place was special. I have always felt this place was bordered on magical. There is a quality to Rosemount High School that you can't put your finger on. We are, and I know it sounds corny, but I think there's a sense of family here that I don't know that exists anyplace else. I think people still see us as little old Rosemount, and little old Rosemount has shown itself time and time again to be a champion, whether it's on the field or on the stage or in the music program or in academics.
In 2016, thanks to the vision of Principal Wollersheim, a new Rosemount High School Foundation was formed to support academics, arts, and athletics at Rosemount High School. By seeking to raise funds for teacher grants, student scholarships, and capital investments.
Over the years, we've adopted a saying here at Rosemount about the history of our school, and it's pride in the past, performance in the present, and promise for the future. And I think that tradition began in 1918 with those 4 female graduates, and it continues today. And so I'm very proud of the accomplishments here at Rosemount High School and to be part of a tradition that continues today.
So, as we celebrate the end of the first 100 years of Rosemount High School, we take great pride in the past while also celebrating the school's performance in the present. And above all, we embrace the promise of the future and look forward to investing in the success of the next 100 years of Rosemount High School.